While modern railway travel only consists of first class and standard class, this hasn't always been the case. Historically, there have been private carriages, inspector saloons, and third class. Though it's not been seen on British railways for almost a century, there also used to be a second class, gone but not forgotten. Present during the Victorian era, today we have the Hornby, Liverpool and Manchester Railway second class coach. I already have the first and third class coaches, so this one fills a nice gap in my Liverpool and Manchester Railway coach rake. I picked this one up on pre-order from Rails of Sheffield for £31.49, which was 10% off the £34.99 recommended retail price. There are a lot of differences between this and the first and third class coaches, but I'm more interested in seeing how it stacks up in terms of quality and performance. The coach arrived in standard Hornby rolling stock packaging, so we'll move swiftly on. On first glance, this certainly looks like an intermediate among the Liverpool and Manchester classes. It has the roof of first class, something not afforded to the third class passengers, but no windows, which the first class did get to enjoy. Speaking of the roof, there's separately fitted railings and a nice embossed planking effect on this. Internally there is some benching, but we're not afforded any more detail other than the pink curtains moulded to each side of the carriage doors. Plastic curtains. Why these couldn't have been fabric inserts, I don't know. And that brings me on to my biggest issue with this model. It's plastic, like the other coaches, but unlike those, boy does this one look it. The doors and wooden planking of the body are tooled well in terms of shape, but in terms of finish it does not look like wood at all. It looks like what it is, brown plastic. There are moulded door handles picked out, but the painting here could have been more finessed. There's a ring of paint spray fading out around them which detracts from the overall level of detail. These should have been separately fitted parts, much like the steps found on the carriage ends. These are a different colour and look worlds better compared to the brown of the coach. Once again, we have the tiny coupling hooks for plastic chain couplings, something I've moaned about on my Tiger and first class carriage reviews, so I won't beat the dead horse. I don't like them. Hornby, please at least give us an M pocket on these. The chassis is identical to that used on the first and third class coaches, albeit in a different brown and black livery. All the separately fitted steps were attached and straight. Underneath we can find some underside detail, which is a nice touch. Included are the two expected plastic moulded chain couplings, useful for getting this hooked up in a train, though they are very fiddly to get on properly. On the scales though, the second class coach comes in at a mere 14 grams. Even at the 10% discount, that's over £2 per gram for this wagon, which, considering it reuses an existing chassis and is fully plastic except for the wheels, that feels criminally overpriced. If it had some metal buffers and handrails and a proper wooden planking texture across it, then it might be worth the £34.99 prescribed by Hornby. As it stands, for what I received, I'm not impressed with that price. The wheels come in at 14.2 and 14.3mm back to back, which is slightly below what's expected. Hopefully that doesn't impact the running at all. On balance, it's nice enough, but the plasticky finish and poor quality choices in some areas detract from this being a fully satisfying model. Let's see how it does on the rails. On its own wheels, the wagon is nice and free rolling on level track, able to move with a nudge of a finger. In a train, it does offer a nice contrast to the first and third class coaches. These other carriages have a paint job and no external planking effect, so their finish comes up much nicer than the plastickiness of the second class carriage. Up at the front of the train we have Tiger, which does have a nice grainy wooden effect on its boiler that really does show up the flatness of the coach. In a train though, to the wagon's credit, it does not show any issues going over points, in forward or reverse. It's just as reliable traversing the baseboard joins without derailment. points and board tests over, off goes the train. In a consist, the wagons look fine, but given the price of new models and the ever-increasing standards, does fine really cut it anymore? Maybe in Hornby's mind it does, but let's round up my thoughts and see. For decoration, the answer is obvious. This looks like plastic. It has poorly painted door handles and lacks any texture to the woodwork it is supposed to portray. There's a sheen to it that shouldn't be there, and it's clearly poorly finished compared to Tiger, Sovereign and the third class coach. I'm marking this down, and deservedly so. For details and features, some details on this are well presented, mainly the roof railings and steps on the carriage ends. The chassis is as detailed as on the other Era 1 coaches, as is expected. What lets it down though are the moulded details that should have been separately fitted, predominantly the door handles and curtains. The paint on the former has been criticised already, and I'm contemplating replacing the plastic curtains for fabric, though how easy this is to do remains to be seen. The fact I'm contemplating that means I'm clearly not happy with all the details on this, so I'm not going to award the point here. On balance the details are fine, but the positives are cancelled out by negatives. Fine doesn't really make me happy. Following on, a lot of the above come down to quality issues. A decision to go with moulded handles led to the need to paint them after the fact, leading to the paint bleed around these. The plastic curtains are sturdier than fabric would be, and probably also cheaper to produce and fit, but they don't sell what they're supposed to be as well. The steps and separately fitted parts were at least fitted straightly and cleanly. Being all plastic, the wagon weighs less than half of a recommended portion of dry adult breakfast cereal. Bit of an odd comparison, but some metal details, albeit small, would have helped add a few grams without overburdening the small Era 1 steam engines, and you would have felt like you got more value for your money. More on that later. The quality didn't live up to expectations, despite me expecting mostly plastic and moulded parts. Another mark lost, I'm afraid. Performance. Giving credit where it's due, there were no issues here. The wagons rolled freely, despite the wheels not quite being gauged up to the standard. The wagons stayed coupled, and dealt with the points and baseball joints admirably. On the whole, it performed well. And finally, already mentioned in passing, on to price. Given all the above, unfortunately price is a foregone conclusion. At 14 grams, with a plastic finish and some poorly painted details, there is no way in hell this is worth a full £35. Hornby reused existing chassis tooling, leaving them with just the body to tool, and given the poor finish this should have cost much less than I paid. £15 to £20 would have been far more reasonable. Compared to the likes of the Hatton's Genesis coaches, which cost about the same as this looks like a total rip-off by comparison. Overall, that gives the Liverpool and Manchester Railway second class carriage my lowest satisfaction score to date, a measly 1 point out of 5. If you're desperate to have one in your Era 1 consist, and can find one for next to nothing, then it's probably worth having. Otherwise, you're paying premium small carriage prices, while having your work cut out to try and make this look as decent as the coaches and engine it's flanked by. With such a good first class and third class coach in the Era 1 range, it's such a shame Hornby dropped the ball here. Maybe second class should have stayed in the past. What do you think of the Hornby, Liverpool and Manchester Railway second class coach? Have I been particularly harsh to it? To be fair, it's not fallen apart like the Hornby 85th anniversary Mallard I looked at, which also had some issues with its finish. If you've picked up one of these coaches, please let me know your thoughts on it down below. Just as I was editing this together, Hornby have announced they are dropping their other planned Era 1 coach, the London and Birmingham Railway Queen Adelaide Saloon, both its standalone release and the coach pack. Pre-orders will have been cancelled with themselves and retailers. I have one on order which I was going to review, and this is actually a shame as that coach looked a lot more promising than what we received here with the second class coach. Perhaps pre-orders gave a gloomy forecast, but the Era 1 coaches were the only new Hornby release I was willing to put my money behind. Everything else was too expensive for what it is, as turned out to be the case here, which is not helped by Hornby's spotty quality record as of late. With Hornby's finances already on the rocks, something really needs to change. Here's hoping they have some new tooled, competitively priced 00 gauge products to be announced later in the year. Otherwise it's not a good outlook. Mild update and rant over. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Take care.